The final installment in the Max Payne series released back in May of 2012 to a very positive critical reception. Developed and published by Rockstar Games, the game was set to reintroduce a familiar face to the new audience of the 7th generations of consoles. It was a departure from Max's roots, and somewhat of a tonal shift for old school fans. It was a game not many asked for, but one that would go on to have a legacy of its own. Max is once again dragged back into a desolate, drug-filled lifestyle, abusing alcoholic substances as a coping mechanism for the loss which still haunts him. He always seems to be one bad decision away from death, filled with remorse and nothing left to fight for. The deliberate shift from New York's dark atmosphere to the more vibrant yet dangerously claustrophobic favelas was in my eyes one of the many positive changes which helped reinvigorate this aging character. As the story unfolds, Max becomes someone you deeply care about. You feel his pain and struggle as he stubbornly tries to fix a world that doesn't want him any longer. The entire cast did a tremendous job embodying their respective characters, evident by their grounded voice work and use of motion capture and technology. Furthermore, the theme of alienation is wonderfully conveyed to the player through Max's limited understanding, forced to string grammatically poor sentences together as locals and enemy grunts continuously mock and ridicule him. The gradual tonal shift previously mentioned from old to new allowed first-time players such as myself to quickly get accustomed to the game's world and its many characters, while also retaining more traditional levels for returning fans. Alongside its comic book-like cutscenes and its overemphasis of key sentences, the use of color bleeding effects during nail-biting shootouts furthers the game's unique presentation. The game's soundtrack is another obvious highlight for many, and one that rarely goes unmentioned due to its prevalence and its masterful implementation. Considering how saddening the story might initially present itself, I felt that Rockstar Games managed to find the perfect balance between the game's visceral narrative to its action movie-like stunts. 8 years later, and it's still as fun as ever, retaining some of the best and most responsive shooting mechanics out there. Throughout its rather short runtime, the game offers a variety of scenarios for Max to exercise his slow-mo abilities. Whether it's sliding through a hallway of lasers, hanging off an ascending crane, or simply jumping onto an oncoming vehicle, there are plenty of fun moments for the player to showcase his supernatural skills. At the same time, the game strikes a unique balance at feeling challenging enough, with Max barely surviving each encounter. Having to replay sections over and over again felt more rewarding and less frustrating, constantly pushing you to perfect each shootout. The player's health is decisively lower than what you would expect from your typical third-person shooter, as it doesn't regenerate unless painkillers are found within each level. This allows Max to feel as vulnerable as his enemies. The way he carries himself while medicating his wounds or his physical inventory limitations only help to realize his character into a real person. Since the release of Red Dead Redemption 2 in the fall of 2018, a common criticism the game garnered was its poor and somewhat clunky shooting controls. I've also noticed a resurgence from fans, asking more and more for some sort of comeback from the Max Payne series. Whether it's a remaster, a full-blown sequel, or a simple addition to Xbox's backwards compatibility roster. Considering the initial mixed feelings the game received from its core audience, I'm glad to see so many now cherishing it and expressing their appreciation. It's definitely not a perfect game, but one I'd love to see make an eventual return, when the time is right.
There it was, the soundtrack to my life. And, for a few seconds, came harmony. Finally.